Welcome, everybody, to Let's Get Intimate. Today, we are talking about understanding the differences between men and women with our expert, Alicia. Um, Alicia, let's talk about men and women. Why aren't we the same? I thought that don't most women expect men to be able to understand them, connect with them, talk about all the feelings and things like that? I mean, that's what makes a perfect man, right?
Yeah, you know what's interesting, Jocelyn? First of all, welcome, audience. What's interesting that I found is that men actually think they understand women. And women, a lot of women think they understand men, and we don't. We often miss the mark. And I think what we really don't understand is how radically different we are. I mean, beginning with just biology, just how we're wired genetically, our brains.
Okay, let's hear more about that biology. What do you mean by that?
Well, like I said in the previous podcast, I touched on this, but that men are wired differently than women, especially their brains. And what I mean by that is that women's brains are it's designed and wired for connection. Everything is connected, our feelings, the way we perceive things, how we view the world, everything is connected. For
Yeah.
men, everything has a separate box. So they compartmentalize everything because that's just how they're wired. You know, there's different boxes for different things.
Right.
And in order for us to communicate with them, we have to really pay attention to just focus on one particular point at a time, because men to be single focused. And
Right.
women, we have something called diffuse awareness, which means we could pay attention to many things at once. And that's the thing that allows us to multitask.
Okay, so what would be an example of when a woman is trying to communicate something with her husband and she's not realizing that she's not focused on the one thing? Because I can tell you there's probably been many times for me where I think we're talking about this one thing, but maybe in that one thing, there are three other points that to me need to be explained in order to continue with this one thing we're talking about.
Right. So men are single focus, and what that means is that the way they communicate is either to solve a problem or to get a point across. So when they listen to women, they're constantly saying, well, what's the point? What's the point? She's going all over the place. What's the point? So that's why a lot of men get very frustrated with us, is because they're trying to figure out the point. So if you make
Mm,
things very descriptive and you start going off on tangents, you've lost them. They become frustrated, and then they just, if they don't have the patience, they can become very irritable, because the way we communicate is for connection and to enhance relationship, right? It's like, think about
yeah.
it this way. When we were cave women, back in the days, we're gathering berries. Like, we had to make a description of where to find the berries, where to find the safest berries. So details are important for us.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean? Men, they don't need the details. They just want the point, get to the point. For
Right.
us, it's that's how we survived in tribal societies. It was to connect with other women and to let them know, listen, this is where you get the safe berries from, right? This is where you
Mm.
get the fruit to survive. And men, it's they're single focused, because it's in order to hunt a deer or to hunt an animal to survive in the wild, you cannot be distracted. Any
Right.
distraction can cause you death. So think about it. This is wiring that has happened through millennia.
Mm-hmm.
So it happens that today we haven't really quite evolved past from that. So men are still today looking for the point. So if you become over descriptive, or if you start adding unnecessary things, if you don't share the point right away, I can guarantee you that that's going to be a very unpleasant conversation for him.
Okay. I want to ask more about examples of this, but I think this is a good topic for another podcast. So I don't want to get too much into it. But
Okay.
that's a really good point about getting to the point and staying on one focus rather than bringing all these other different aspects of what happened in this situation that leads me to want to explain to you why I feel this way in this moment. But like starting
Right,
with the
right.
point.
Yeah, it's just so helpful. And
Mhm.
men will actually feel more bonded to you when you express the point early on, because now they're like, oh, okay. And if you just want to share something, then you have to let them know, baby, I don't need you to solve my problem. I don't need you
Mhm.
to figure out the point. I just really want, can you give me 10 minutes just so I can like rant for a little bit and let it all out? Can you just listen to me with no advice, no suggestions, just listen. And they'll be happy to. Because, but
Right.
as long as you let them know beforehand, like, this is what I need from you, then most men will be like, oh, sure, okay. I don't have to
Yeah.
solve a problem. I don't need to do anything. Okay, fine.
Right. So they can just shut that off and just,
They
okay,
can just shut that off.
I'm just being blank right now.
Because if you don't warn them, if you do not warn them, they're going to continuously look for the point and then they're just going to get upset.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Their brains are different. Their brains are different. Totally.
Their brains are different. Yes, and you can see this even as children when the toys that we gravitate to, like men are usually, most men, because again, there's always exceptions, but most men are wired to like pick up tools, pick up like toy hammers, toy nails, equipment, so to speak, and they're
Right.
also drawn to things that move, cars, trucks, trains,
Mm-hmm.
whereas little girls are more wired to pick up things that are nurturing, like, teddy bears, Barbie dolls, things to teach others, and again, there's always an exception, but there has been studies done that when you look at the kid, and this is really apparent at the age of 3 for a young child, boys will start to gravitate to what's considered boy toys, and little girls will be gravitate to what's considered the more feminine toys. And
Right.
usually, if a boy does pick up a toy, like let's say a Barbie doll, he'll use it as a weapon.
Yeah.
So it's just very interesting to look at that these differences are really apparent from like that early, from the ages of 3, starting from the ages of 3.
Yeah, like the nurturing side for the girls, right? Like I went back to the United States recently and I asked my little Guatemalan niece what she wanted as a gift and she asked for a doll and I got the doll and my mom's like, "We have to find a brush for the doll. Little girls have to have brushes to brush the doll's hair." And it took us forever when we found a brush. When I gave her the doll, she immediately grabbed the brush and went to brushing her hair and treating her like her baby. So it's like
Yeah.
very
I
much that
mean, and the thing is,
nurturing.
this isn't to say that little boys will not gravitate towards teddy bears, but a lot of boys, they do develop that, like some boys will pick up a teddy bear and be attracted to it, but that doesn't mean that he's not going to be attracted to the trucks and the cars. Like that would be more of his priority, the toys he would first gravitate towards.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. And I think it can depend too, they can have both, right? I mean, now I'm thinking about my other Guatemalan nephew, and he has mostly trucks and dinosaurs. Those are all the toys that he
Yes.
plays with. But sometimes him and the girl will play, and they had a unicorn, and he was crying because she took the unicorn away from him. And so it's cool to see that balance of like they prefer this, but they also have a nurturing side where they want the soft,
Oh,
fluffy
of
toy.
course. Yes. Yes. Actually, it was interesting because I was reading a study on roughhousing, and they're saying how important it is for boys to roughhouse with their dads, or, a present male figure, because it teaches them about their strength. So if they hurt another boy or another girl, like it brings in it brings a certain type of awareness to strength and how to be careful when you're being with someone. So a lot of mothers are very afraid of roughhousing because they think they're going to get hurt. But in essence, you're actually teaching your child not to hurt because he's now becoming aware of his physical strengths.
Oh, that's interesting. Wow, that's a good point.
Mm-hmm. And it's actually a very important part in their development.
Right, because if they don't have the experience of roughhousing, they might accidentally hurt someone later on in life because they don't know how to stop themselves. They don't have the
Yes,
experience of knowing how much is too much.
exactly. And they said there was another study done of young boys who did not have a male role model, and these were the boys that usually hurt other kids accidentally because they didn't know their strength.
Wow, that's really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
So a
and
lot of
girls
us
don't do
mothers are
this.
like, right, a lot of mothers are like afraid of all this rough housing, but it's actually something we should actually encourage.
Oh, wow. And it seems rare, not maybe not rare because me and my sister did it, although my sister claims we didn't and she doesn't remember the incredibly violent fights that we used to have. But it doesn't seem that girls naturally fight as often as boys would. And so maybe it's that masculine side of us, that testosterone that was coming out when me and my sister would get in these fights.
Right. And the thing to notice too is that, yeah, I mean, women fight, I mean, that's not to say that we don't, but, men are wired for competition. So fighting amongst for hierarchy and fighting to like find your place in the world is an important part of the masculine journey. For women, we are more wired for cooperation, again, because we're just more relationship oriented overall.
Yeah, I mean, creating things together. I know in my relationship, it gets so hard because I'm always wanting to cooperate and to create things, make projects, like what is the word I'm looking for? I can't remember, but and for him, it's like, oh, you want it your way. You always have to have it your way. And I'm like, no, I'm just telling you my idea. Now it's your turn to tell me your idea, and then we'll put our ideas together and create something different. But it's like, why does it have to be a competition?
Right. Because I mean, I think as women, we kind of have to learn what we don't kind of have to, we have to learn how to communicate with men because it's very easy for men to perceive us to be a threat, and especially in today's culture, things can seem to be emasculating, even though it may not be our intention as women to do things that may seem emasculating to a man, but he can perceive it in that way and thus treat you like competition.
Okay. So it's having to have the same goal. So almost like in a relationship, the man and the woman have to have the same goal in what they're communicating and in what they're doing, if it's a project or whatever. Like you said earlier with getting the
Yeah,
point across. Like if we're creating a project, I need to get the point across of first, this is what I'm going for, and then share my idea.
yes, yes. And what I've heard from men is that, men are wired for appreciation and respect, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of men often complain that women don't listen to them. And it's
Mm.
not that we don't listen, is that we are both wired to different, like we're just wired to listen differently. So if we understand to just let them, like, just, I like to imagine putting an imaginary duct tape in my mouth. And when he's talking, just like let him talk and talk. And even it may take a while, because the more he talks, that is the way men can access their feelings. And
Mm.
it takes a long time because they don't have the same access to their emotions the way we do. So it takes them a while to really figure out what they're feeling, and they have to talk quite a bit in order to get there. So I like to really put like this duct tape in my mouth and just let them talk. And then when they're done, then I ask the next question. Like I don't bombard him with different questions, because they could be in the middle of explaining something and you can ask them another question and they'll completely lose their train of thought and they'll have to start from scratch, and we think they're idiots,
Oh my gosh.
because
Yeah.
for us, everything is connected. Like, how, what do you mean? You know what I mean? For us, it's like everything is jumbled up and connected, and they're just not wired that way. So I think
Right.
that's why a lot of communication in relationships is such a challenge for both men and women. It's just because we're wired differently. And if we just understood that, like if men understood that for us everything is together, we feel like emotions are such a big part of our lives. It rules everything. And for men it's logic, it's facts, and they need more time to connect with that part of them. And we just have to be more understanding, and we have to be patient.
Right. And also realizing that maybe men don't understand how quickly we can process, right? Like if my
Exactly.
man is explaining something to me and I hear it, for the second time, and I ask something else, but he hasn't completely finished everything he has to say and process and I haven't realized that there was more to say, then like you said, he'll lose his train of thought and think he has to start over and think I'm not listening to him, but I've just processed it a lot faster, but he doesn't understand that. So it's almost like what I'm hearing you say is we also have to understand that they don't have the ability to process as fast as we can.
No, they don't. They do not have the ability at all. It takes a really long time for them. And so patience is key.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that men really, really love and adore from women is we really can just take the time to just take it slow with them in terms of talking, and just let them talk and don't bombard them, and accept
Mm-hmm.
what they have to say. Sometimes, often they feel challenged by women. Like if women don't like something that they've said, instead of respecting it, they'll challenge it, and that can create other issues in the relationship. It creates more distance and disconnection.
Yeah, so that's a really challenging thing for both ends, right? I mean, for the man to be more patient with the woman and understanding, but also my ego hears that and thinks, but that's all I want too. And so then it seems like a lot of times with men and women, when we're in this relationship and one person wants to be listened to and the other person wants to be listened to, it's like, I want it. No, I want it. And then you get in this argument over, um, he's not listening to me, she's not listening to me, because we both have the same need and neither one of us are able to give it to the other person.
Right. And that's why when I listen to a man, I often like to reflect back what he's saying to make sure that I'm getting it right. Like, oh, am I getting this right? I hear that you're saying XYZ. And just
Mm-hmm.
asking him, like, am I getting this right? Am I understanding you? And you do it in a place that comes from compassion, because tone also plays a role. If you're
Right.
coming from a place where you're being snarky and sarcastic, that's just going to ruin everything. But if you're really coming from that place, like, hey, I really want to understand where you're coming from, and I want to make sure that I'm getting it right, and you reflect it back to him, then he's able to correct you or let you know where no, you're misunderstanding this part. And what I really mean is this. And again, the more they talk about it, the more they access deeper feelings and deeper things, and they're able to communicate better. But it takes a while.
Right. And I just want to insert a little thing of mine there. This is a good place where embodiment practices will help
Mhm.
connecting to the body, connecting to the breath while listening. And rather than connecting to, but I want to say this and my ego's here and I want to do this and I'm not being heard, but like my breath is listening right now.
Right. And usually the question I ask myself is, do I want to listen to understand or do I want to be right?
Oh, yes. Oh my gosh, that's a hard one.
Because it's important. And, another thing in the difference that we're wired is that women are like, relationships are everything to a woman. It's how we survived in the wild. Like, if
Mhm.
we didn't build relationships with other women, if we didn't have a protector and provider protecting us and providing for us, we would not survive. And keep in mind
Right.
that if we got a man angry back then, we would be afraid that he would throw us to the lions. So you best believe you're going to try to treat your man well. You know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
it's all
Yeah.
about survival. So there's this instinctual part of women. This is where the people pleasing comes from for us women.
Mm.
Because at one point, it was about survival. If you didn't please certain people in the tribe, you were in danger.
Right. Wow.
It was the way that we could control our survival. Now, thank God, we don't need that. So now we can choose to listen and to communicate from a place of compassion and love and not ego-based survival.
Right. And not swinging to the other side of the spectrum, right? Where it's like we used to have to be here in, total surrender to the other side where it's
Yes.
like, I'm not going to take this anymore and like switching roles and not doing that and emasculating the man or not doing that and kind of confusing the man and making him lost in where his role is.
Right. I mean, that's just unhealthy overall. I feel like um, I feel like, masculinity has taken a really, really, really bad rap when really it's just a lot of bad behavior that you see coming from men or women. It's not because of toxic masculinity or toxic femininity. It's just toxic people. It's just people who are
Mm.
unhealed. Do you know what I
Right.
mean? So
Yeah.
when you're
Mhm.
unhealthy, any behavior that you're going to exhibit is going to be unhealthy because you're coming from an unhealthy place. It's not that masculinity itself is toxic. It's actually a very healthy thing.
Right. Oh,
They've built empires, they've built civilizations based on that. But
yeah.
also femininity and feminine influence actually complements that. It becomes that power duo when you combine both, and we can create magical things when both are in alignment.
Yes. Yes, I agree. I like to think of the masculine and the feminine as the masculine is space and the feminine is the stars, the light that fills the space.
Yes. Oh, that sounds beautiful. I love that. So yummy.
Yeah.
I love
Yeah.
that. And, I've actually heard this from the mouths of men. Men say, when before they met their partner or loved one, they're like, my life was really black and white, and she just brought color. She brought texture. She brought all of these beautiful, it's like she just added all these wonderful parts to my life. So that's what we are to men, healthy men.
Yeah.
We bring that added dimension. So, and again, that's part of what makes us different.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Alicia, is there any other important pieces you want to bring to sharing the differences between men and women in this podcast? Anything that we've left out?
I don't think so. I think, well, I mean, I have a lot to say, but that'll be for future episodes. But I do want to, especially talking to the women, I do want to stress to be more understanding and be more patient, and just to remind you that men are really, really different from us. And it takes a while, and I want you to be patient with yourself too, and to give yourself compassion when things don't go right, because we're all in this journey together and we're all learning the differences between men and women. But the more we know, the better decisions we'll make, and the better we'll be able to relate to our partners or dates.
Yes. More smooth love can come through our connection.
Yes, yes. And again, it takes time, and you just have to give yourself that patience and the compassion, and learn it also. Like, just we all have to do the work. This isn't something that we're born with. We don't learn this automatically. This is something that you have to take it upon yourself to, like, I'm going to be committed to understanding my partner and show up to be the best version of me to him, and see how that influences him.
I love that. I love that. Yeah. And accepting him for who he is, right? Like, he is a man.
Yes, you have to accept them at face value, because
Right.
that's another. And I think maybe in the next few episodes, I'll touch more on that, on accepting your man as opposed to trying to change him.
Yeah,
I
and
think
how we
that'll
can
be
do
a
that. Let's do that. That sounds like a great topic.
okay. Okay, I have a lot to say on that, so that'll be
Yeah,
a really good episode.
that's great. Okay, well, this was fun, insightful, and helpful. Good reminders on how to be more patient in my relationship also, but for the rest of you out there. And so, Alicia, would you like to share a little bit about how people can get a hold of you, and what kind of work you do?
Yes, so I do coaching for women, and I help women to understand men. That's definitely that is my coaching practice.
Mhm.
But I also have group, I will be offering group workshops, and you can see that on my Patreon. I'll link it in the show notes. But if you want more information, everything's on my website, which is thealchemicalpriestess.com. And you can find me on Instagram at Alchemical Priestess.
The alchemical priestess Alicia Sierra. I can't roll my R's, I'm sorry.
Yes, it's okay.
Well, thank you, Alicia. It was fun, of course, as always, to get together and create a podcast. Um, okay, well, thank you all for joining us today, and we'll see you around the next time.
We'll see you soon. Bye.
Bye.